to the Ho Ho Show.
Rated the #1 most listened to podcast on Pluto. So join us now as we discuss news, politics, current events, and so much more. So clear the airwaves and strap in as we
Defend the Constitution, because freedom matters.
broadcasting from the Cottage Studio. So welcome to the Ho Ho Show, and as always, I am your host, Ho Ho. So how y'all's doing? I hope you're doing good. I really do. So we are finally going to continue with a series that I started over a year and a half ago called Knowing the Constitution. This time we are going to conclude with part 2, Knowing the Declaration. This time we're covering the transgressions. Oh, yes. So this is definitely going to be one of those episodes that may very possibly tick you off something fierce. I know it did me. You know, whenever I was reading these and going back through them not that long ago, last weekend, actually, it was definitely, whoa. You know, because it's been a while since I had read the Transgressions. You know, it really has been. And there's like 30 of them in there. Or at least 29 or 30 of them. I don't know, you know, but, you know, more or less what it amounts to is it's like, okay, now this was the infuriating part of it. All right. Because whenever I was reading through these transgressions, it occurred to me that everything that I was reading of what the crown did to the colonies, which is what led up to the Revolutionary War, you know, the whole thing, that this was stuff that is going on now, you know, because you can correlate something that's going on today that is exactly, or at least in some way, shape, or form, very much like what the colonies was going through on how they were being treated by the king. And it's like, wow, you know, like I said, it's been a while since I was going through the transgressions that I read those. And last time I did, I mean, it was like, you know, I didn't really think about it. I didn't put a lot of thought into it. You know, I mean, there was a definite, wow, that sounds like something that's going on right now, but I really didn't directly relate it to what was going on. And the scary aspect of it is all of these things that are being done has been happening within the past 2 years. That ought to say something. That ought to say something. Now, this is actually the second time that I've tried to do this. The first time I read like all of this, you know, like every bit of the transgressions and putting the, putting my commentary into it as well. This time, you know, that ended up being over an hour, and I didn't want to do this episode that long. Now, granted, I'm not saying that isn't important. And I know on some of these other episodes, that's what I did is I went through and I read the entire thing. There you go. But this one I wanted it to be a little different. I wanted to do it a little different. So with this, I'm not actually going to read each individual transgression, but what I am going to do is bring it up to date. I'm going to put the correlation in there with what's going on today to really bring it home. You know what I mean? Now, I very much do recommend, you know, getting a pocket constitution and reading the Declaration of Independence and the transgressions, or just pulling it up online or what have you, but read it. You know, I definitely recommend you to read it. Very much so. Now, just to give you a little, you know, a little nugget here, okay? Now, whenever we, you know, the Pilgrims, whenever we came over here, you know, in 1482, 92, whatever, Columbus sailed the ocean blue, you know, they knew, okay, that there was land over here. They knew this continent existed, all right? Because prior to Columbus coming over here, you know, this land had been visited by the Vikings. Okay. We know this. This is part of history. We know this, and they knew it too. Okay, they had heard some things, they had read some things, they knew that there was something here. So it wasn't like it was a surprise. Now, I mean, granted, yes, they still called the natives, we called them Indians, because, what they were looking for was a different route to go to get to India. That was the whole point, or at least that's what they said. But in reality, they were looking for a new, far away home. That's what they were looking for. And one of the things that the colonialists were wanting, one of the things of why they were leaving was freedom. Freedom from persecution. They wanted religious freedom, and one of the goals was to be so far away from the crown that the crown would kind of leave them alone and let them govern themselves. That's really what they were after. That's what they were looking for. They still kind of wanted that protection of the crown, but they didn't want the subjugation of it. They didn't want to be subject to it. That's a lot of what it amounted to. But the king didn't see it that way. Whether it be for one reason or the other, whatever agenda we have is pure speculation. But there was still that heavy-handedness of government. And that's a lot of what led to the Revolutionary War. That, the colonists got to a point to where, we've had enough. We're fed up. We're not going to take it anymore. And there's something else that I want you guys to understand too is, these transgressions that the crown put the colonists through, our own government is doing worse to us today. They really are. I'm just saying. It is accurate. It is true. That's why I say, read the Transgressions. Read what happened. Read what the crown did to us. Read why we decided to break away from Great Britain and form our own form of government. Read it. This way you too can make those correlations and see, wow, they did all that over something that we may in some way, shape, or form consider to be trivial. Holy crap. So let's go ahead and go through it. We're going to do this one by one. But again, I'm not going to be reading the individual transgressions. Instead, is what I'm going to be doing is reading the commentary that I have thrown into this. So number one, the executive branch is refusing to enforce immigration laws. And that's exactly what the purview is of the federal government, mind you. Okay. They are supposed to, that as part of their charge. This isn't something that they have the right to do. They have the responsibility to, they have the obligation to enforce the immigration laws, and the executive branch specifically to enforce the laws. And that's part of the, his oath of office, to, carry out the laws that are written and to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America, all of that stuff, that is in there. Specifically, that's their job, to defend the border. And they're not doing it. They're not enforcing the laws that they are supposed to be enforcing. They are not following through and doing the job they are specifically told is your job. Instead, is what you have is you have the federal government getting all up in our business and doing stuff that they're not supposed to be doing. In the meantime, while doing all that, they're not doing specifically the job that they actually do have. Failing miserably. Moving on. Number two, refusing to overturn unconstitutional laws like Obamacare. Because a law that goes against the Constitution is unconstitutional. And that's kind of duh. It sounded way more intelligent in my head before I said it out loud. But if it's a law that goes against the Constitution, that goes against what the Constitution says, then that is a law that is supposed to be struck down. That is the job of the Supreme Court. That is specifically I don't necessarily want to say first and foremost, but that is their job, to do away with, to strike down any law that goes against the Constitution. Moving on to number 3. Ruled not by the people, but by a party. You see, this is the thing that in Great Britain, you had a crown, you had your monarchy, and I don't know if this was, again, because I don't remember, everything as far as, how, I believe there was a parliamentary, and I think now, at least in some way, shape, or form, that the crown is more of a figurehead and not, 100% the ruling body. And I don't know how much of that was true back there, but they still had a representative body. They still had, their oligarchs. They had their bureaucrats. That's what they had. And one of the things that our founding fathers wanted to get away from over here was that system, because they wrote the Constitution to be of the people, by the people, for the people, not to have a ruling class that was put over us. Career politicians was something that they never wanted. They never dreamed of. They did not want your job to be a politician and spend 40 plus years sitting in a seat. Sitting in a seat. They didn't want that. That was exactly not what they wanted to do. They did not want government to be a ruling class over the people. They didn't want to create that separation. They didn't want to create that level of privilege, if you will. They didn't want to do it. And one of the things that our founding fathers, and specifically, I believe it was George Washington, that warned against a party system, because he knew that in falling for a two-party system, you would get to the point to where you're not voting for an individual. You're not voting for what this person actually stands for. Instead, is what you're going to be doing is voting for a party. And in effect, you're going to be losing your representation by doing that. See, because here's the thing. The DNC, the RNC, these are not functions of government. They are not beholden to the government. In fact, they are private businesses, private industry. So in the US of A, from top to bottom, the entire government is controlled by two private businesses. And these are private businesses that, yes, you may have elected them into office. You may have went to the ballot box and filled in the little circle next to their name. You may have done that. But they don't represent you. They don't work for you. You're talking about a ruling class that votes for their own raises. So yes, you may pay their salaries per se. Technically you do, but even still, they're the ones who control their own rate of pay. So, they're paid, yes, with your money, but they pay themselves and they represent the party that they're affiliated with. They don't represent you. Yes, you may vote them into office. That means they have to campaign and they have to make promises. But for some reason, because we've told them and shown them that they don't have to, they don't follow through with their campaign promises. They don't work for us anymore. One of the very things that they were wanting to get away from and warned us, don't fall for that trap, we did. We have lost our representation. This one is also very telling. Speaking about losing representation, think about the time frame that some of these laws are passed, specifically Obamacare. This was done in the middle of the night, bright and early, to kind of limit coverage of it. And it was also done in such a time to where certain people wouldn't be there trying to push it through. And there's also the aspect of it of, if you want to know what's in it, you got to pass it because the thing is huge. The bill is huge. The bill is thicker than most Bibles. It's like, holy crap. Do you really need a law with that many stinking words? I mean, dude, think about it. The Constitution is a small document. You know, my pocket Constitution, okay, including the Declaration of Independence and the all of the amendments, you know, not just the Bill of Rights, but all of the amendments that have been added. There's a little bitty pocket Constitution, like 36 pages, and that's it. It is not a big read. You don't need a lot of words. But that's what you have in the bills that these so-called representatives pass. You don't know what's in these bills. Think about the Build Back Better. Do we know what's in that bill? No. There's way too much in it, and nobody's read all of it. It's like, holy crap. How are we supposed to vote for something whenever we don't even know what we're voting for? And who cares, because these people don't represent us in the first place. Moving on. This one here is number 5. And as representatives, if they go against the grains of politics, they can be removed from their committee, basically making it to where the representatives of these various districts that they do represent, the states that they do represent, well, they lose representation because, you know, they're rocking the boat. Absolutely rocking the boat. The next one, number 6, kind of deals with, being ruled by bureaucrats that you're not in control of. And that's exactly what we have in this nation. Because if you really stop and think about it, we have the EPA, we have the Department of Transportation, we have the Department of Education, we have all these different bureaus that what do? They spend a butt ton of time writing regulation. And yes, these are regulations. They are not laws, but at the same time, these regulations carry the weight of law. These are unelected bureaucrats that in a year's time write 10, 30 times more rules, regulations, pages worth of them than what the legislative branch actually writes. And just so you know, that's unconstitutional. It is the legislative branch whose sole task is to write laws. The executive branch to enforce those laws properly, and the judicial branch to, kind of balance the scales to make sure that the laws that are written are constitutional and the way that they are enforced doesn't violate rights. That's what their job is. The executive branch with the Department of Transportation can't write laws, but that's what you have. I'm a truck driver. My life is controlled, not by Congress, not by the body that is supposed to represent me. It's controlled by unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats that are secure in their position. That's what you have. Number 7. This one deals with... kind of reading this one a little bit. It's talking about immigration and migration. That's what it's talking about, immigration and migration. Allowing solely for the benefit of a political leaning, allowing people from the southern border just to flow up from Mexico because the Democrat Party believes as though they would have a more secure base so that this way they don't lose office, and yet they are at the same time limiting, restricting, and refusing to let Cubans come up here because a difference in background. You have Cubans that are going through a communist regime that are running away from that. And you have people far too often, whenever they're coming from these communist regimes, are like, don't you guys understand what's going on in your own country? And they know that they're not going to vote Democrat. And so to protect their own power, allowing people to just come across, and really a very sickening thing is also happening while they're doing this, because our vote, your vote, my vote, is being drowned out by people whom do not belong here, are here illegally. And I don't care if you like it or not, they are not supposed to vote because the Constitution does not protect the rights of non-citizens. If it did, then we need to go over to China because of the violation of labor laws, more specifically child labor laws, and we need to do something about it. Because if everybody is protected by our Constitution, even though they are not citizens, then we need to be enforcing it everywhere, enforce it globally. But you and I both know that's ridiculous. It can never happen. These illegal aliens that come over here, the Constitution does not protect them. These various rights. I'm not saying being inhumane to people. You catch them, you send them back. You don't have to mistreat them. You don't need to do anything else. There are, things that are illegal regardless of who you're doing it for. But a person who is here illegally does not have the freedom of speech. They don't necessarily have the freedom to peaceably assemble. They don't have that freedom. They're not citizens. The Constitution does not grant them that right because the Constitution is preserved for us. Preserved for the citizen, not the non-citizen. There's a difference. Moving on. Oh, yeah. And the process of legal immigration is extremely time-consuming. It is extremely expensive. It takes a while. I agree that our immigration system is broken, but that doesn't mean you just let people flood across the border without defending it and without enforcing our laws. That, one does not necessarily mean the other. Now we're moving on. This one is talking about laws and how these laws are carried out, talking about the judicial branch. Or I'm sorry, not laws are carried out, but the judicial branch. You see, the judicial branch was formed and structured in such a way that it was classified as the unpolitical branch of our government. Okay? Because you have the president whom has to run for office, has to do his thing. It is a political branch. You have Congress, the same thing. It is a political branch, but the judiciary branch was made in such a way as to be non-political because they don't focus on people. It's not a people-driven kind of a thing. It is more about the laws and how it weighs against the Constitution, not necessarily about, somebody killed somebody else and therefore that goes to the Supreme Court. No, that's not necessarily a Supreme Court issue. They deal in laws and their constitutionality. Therefore, they are, and they're appointed, they are not elected. So it's supposed to be a political free branch of government. But you and I both know that's not really the case. And then moving on to number 9 takes it even to a different place because you have like what has been going on down in Texas with the possibility of the overturning of Roe versus Wade, which I completely agree with, by the way. These are issues that, as per the 10th Amendment, as per the Constitution, are not supposed to be done by the federal government. It's supposed to be a state issue, and of which case Roe versus Wade should be overturned. That means that each individual state should be able to make up its own mind on whether they want to allow that. And no, it is not a freedom to kill your unborn child. But moving on. The judges are expected to adhere to a certain code, if you will. You have been hearing threats, even by one of the judges, and this is a threat that's been going on for a while because the Democratic Party really don't like the aspect that they are no longer in control of the Supreme Court. For the first time in over 50 years, since President Trump has put Republicans on there to where Republicans finally are, overrepresented. Like I said, the first time in 50 years that this has happened. And now, considering the Democrats don't really get their way in the Supreme Court, what are they talking about? We're going to pack the court to ensure that that never happens again. They want to add another 9, or at least another 4 Supreme Court justices. Being ridiculous is what it amounts to. They want to have, 15 total. No, 13 total justices, because they want to add 4 more seats, at least 4 more seats. Unconstitutional, because the Democrat Party wants to control how things are run, the judicial branch. And if they don't get their way, then they want to pack the court. Yeah. Moving on to number 10. You have, being ruled by, like I was talking before, the bureaucrats, a bunch of unelected, not beholden to the people that can do whatever the heck they want to, and they can violate the Constitution, they can violate the rules, they can overstep their bounds. But as what you have is people far too often, instead of seeing criminal time for doing that, they get fired from whatever office they held. They get transferred to another department or another bureaucracy, and they end up in a better, higher paying job. So their punishments to these people is actually to promote them to bigger, better things. Like the Department of Education, the Department of Interior, Homeland Security, Department of Transportation, the Homeland Security, the EPA. This lists of bureaucrats that do more to control your life than the legislative branch ever could dream of. Unelected people that are not beholden to what we want. Unelected bureaucrats. Moving on, number 11. I don't know if you are aware of this, but having a standing army over a certain amount of time, and we're going to cover this whenever we do the next piece of Knowing the Constitution, because this is in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 12 of the U.S. Constitution, talking about a standing army. It's actually unconstitutional. So these never-ending wars are unconstitutional. Now, granted, there is this thing as far as posse comitatus, because, one of the things was having troops, a standing army, all up in our business. Now, granted, posse comitatus says that, U.S. troops cannot, with the exception of guarding the border, you have a specific job to do. Guns can never be pointed inward is basically what I'm talking about. And a standing army, not having that, having a limitation on that, is one of the things that they put in there to kind of ensure that the guns would not be pointed inward, like what was going on before the revolution. Moving on. One of the things about the Second Amendment talks about a militia. And one of the things that they try to say, in dealing with the National Guard is, well, the National Guard is your militia. It's like, well, no, it isn't. It's not a militia at all. And here's the thing whenever it comes to the militia. These are people that, no matter their intentions, okay, this isn't about intentions, but think about the name. You have this state, National Guard, Ohio State National or Ohio National Guard, Illinois National Guard, California National Guard. That's what you have. What's the key word in there? National. The president, at any point in time, does reserve the authority to take control of the National Guard. So there you have the president still being able to seize control of that regardless. And if you guys remember back during Hurricane Katrina, you had National Guard members that, and I remember this story coming out of it. And I tell you what, it ticked me off to no end. But you had, National Guardmen that were there during Hurricane Katrina. And what they were doing is they were rounding people up and they were putting them in the, a stadium down there. I forget which one. Okay. That's one of the things they were doing. And there was a guy in a house that the sign said, I have food, I have a dog, and I have a gun. They took pictures and took selfies with this sign. And then the National Guard went into that man's house. They let him keep his food. They let him keep his dog. But they took away his right to self-defense because they felt that was unsafe. They didn't want him to go around and, being a nuisance. So instead, they allowed it to where he was defenseless. He couldn't defend his house, home, and property or his own life. That's unconstitutional. But yet, just during Hurricane Katrina, that happened. And that was the National Guard that did that. Yeah, moving on. Okay, I thought I hit something. We're still going, still recording. Okay, I thought I hit a button. That could have been bad. All right, moving on. And this one is talking about, about citizens being subjected to outside control. Like with the UN. There was a time. Well, we'll get to that here in a second. Actually, let me pause on that one. But you have like with the Paris Accord, you have with like the Iranian deal that Obama did, which was completely unconstitutional because that was in essence, it was a treaty that never went through Congress. It was done by the executive branch. It was done by fiat. Again, it was against the Constitution. You can't do this. But here's what happened that really boiled my blood. And this was during the Obama administration. Okay. This was during the Obama administration. But you had our UN representative went over there and he signed a UN ruling that if enough countries signed off on that, it would have enforced to all of the nations that were in the UN to their gun law. That would have meant that the United States of America would have been subject to rulings that not only go against the Constitution, but of being controlled by a foreign army, foreign rules that were, again, unconstitutional. And yes, that happened under the Obama administration. Our representative to the UN signed some type of a resolution that if enough countries signed off on, it would have been illegal gun ownership, and it would have made gun ownership completely illegal. That was one of the things that they tried to do in order to sidestep the Second Amendment. Yeah. And I believe that really got glossed over whenever that actually happened. There wasn't a lot of people talking about it. I remember hearing it. I remember reading it. Wasn't something you really heard. Not something you heard at all. And this one, I'm going to go ahead and read this one just because why not? And that is, number 14 for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. But I'm taking this one a different direction because this one, again, because of posse comitatus, because we're not supposed to have a standing army. But no knock warrants. No, we may not have, army personnel that will take control of our home. But what we do have is, even still, they can break into your house without announcing themselves and just go in. Not announce themselves, not make their presence known. I mean, granted, it's like, I do understand why under certain circumstances they are done. In some cases, I do understand why. I don't want to say it's necessary, but I do at least understand it. But what I would like to see is more transparency to a judge on this, because mistakes have happened. Mistakes absolutely has happened. People have died. It's not a good thing. It's never a good thing. I think it's one of those things in the system, as part of the system, that, if you're not going to send it bye-bye, then it really, 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 really needs to be heavily restricted. Very heavily restricted. But anyway, moving on. That's still unconstitutional. Just so you know. We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We are pretty well halfway through this. So just one quick break, and we will be right back.
You are correct. You are correct. You are correct. You are correct.
All right, welcome back to the Ho-Ho Show. So yes, we are continuing with this one, knowing the declaration, the part 2, doing the second half of that, numbers 15 into 30. And this one, I actually kind of wrote this one down, not right, because I actually talked about this one on a previous one, talked about this with Hurricane Katrina and what happened down there. But number 15, I'll just go ahead and read this one real quick because it is a quick one. And this one's actually talking about the Army protecting them by a mock trial and protecting them from punishment for any murders or laws that they had broken. Okay, I'm going to take that a different direction. Because what you have actually in Washington is since it consists of career politicians, something that was never supposed to be, it was never designed to be that way. You have people that are privileged and free from prosecution. They have these mock trials in the Senate, these hearings in the Senate. These aren't courts of law. They are more or less courts of review. So what? Because with Hillary Clinton, she broke the law. I don't care how you feel about Hillary Clinton. I don't care if you are left. I don't care if you are right. I don't care. The bottom line is she broke the law. They wanted to argue intent, that, she never had the intent of doing it. But the law is written in such a way that it doesn't matter what her intent was. She still mishandled classified information, period. And a lot of it. She should be in prison. She should be punished because she broke the law. And the sad thing is, and this is the thing that's irritating, a person who was a former general did far less than what Hillary Clinton did and did get punished for it. He did get in trouble. So here you have a politician, protected class, who broke the law that has been enforced in modern history. Never seen her day in court because she was never, no charges were ever given to her, even though it was cleared. The FBI even said that, yes, she broke the law. She broke the law. She mishandled classified information. She broke the law. No charges came about it, and she's still a free individual. Completely goes against the Constitution. Moving on, number 16. Cutting off trade to different parts of the world. What was the first thing that Biden did whenever he got into office? Shut down the Keystone Pipeline. And you have through these mandates, through these lockdowns, you have our trade, our supply chain extremely disrupted, backups at the ports, shutting off trade. That's in effect what they're doing. They're shutting off trade. Imposing taxes without our consent. That's exactly what goes on up in Washington. Why? Because, like I had said before, the people that are up there in Washington, they don't represent us. They represent the party. And might I remind you again, with Obamacare, if you want to know what's in it, you got to pass it. They are subjecting us to taxes without us ever knowing what the heck is inside these various bills. Adding to our deficit, making us pay for things that we are not supposed to have to pay for. And regardless of whether you want to argue that these representatives do or do not represent us, whatever, they don't even know what's in half of these bills because they're too big to read. They force them through. They don't even let us know what the heck's in it. We don't know until after the fact, and the various rulings that they pass on a lot of these bills don't actually take into effect right away. They take into effect at the next election block or after, whenever they actually kick in. And considering there's too many people out there that have the memory of a peanut, they don't remember, and they get away with it time and time again. Moving on. Number 18 is not having the benefit of a trial by jury. See, like in the Rittenhouse trial, I mean, yeah, you might want to say that it was trial by jury, but how did the mainstream media react? How did a lot of politicians react to that one? They wanted mob rule. They considered him guilty and a white supremacist well before the trial even happened, right after the fact, labeling him a white supremacist. You have other cases that has happened that's the same thing. They didn't care about the facts of the case. The mob decided on guilt and innocence before the trial, and they didn't care what came out of that trial. If it was not the verdict that they wanted, and I'm honestly surprised that we didn't see as many riots as we've seen after the Rittenhouse trial, but that's what you have. You have people that want a mob rule, not justice. Moving on, we are supposed to have equal representation under the law, equal application of the law, equal protection under the law. That's what we are supposed to have. We are legally not supposed to be divided by race, color, creed, any of that. And our graduated taxes is unconstitutional, because how is it if I am unmarried and you are married, how is it that we pay a different percentage of taxes based off of that? That's not equal representation. That's not equal application under the law. You're benefiting one person over another. How is that constitutional? Oh yeah, that's right. It's not. Moving on. Making D.C. a state, which is a direct violation of the Constitution. And granted, they haven't done that yet, but that's one of the things they're talking about. They want to do this. See, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 17 of the Constitution says that D.C. is not supposed to be a state. And whenever you read the articles of the Federalist Papers, when you read those, it is clear as to why they made that ruling, because they did not want the seat of our federal government to be within the jurisdiction and therefore under the control of any individual state. No state should have that much power over the workings of the federal government. Back then, there was 2 states that donated land for the formation of the federal government of Washington, D.C. I believe that was Virginia, and the other one was Maryland. If anything, is what should happen is not D.C. become its own state, but for that land to actually go back to Maryland, which is exactly what happened in the case with Virginia. That land went back to the state that it originally was part of. If anything, that is the right and proper way to do it. But again, no state should have that much control over the intricate workings of government. No state should have that much power. Moving on. Obama said that I will fundamentally change the nation. And you also have these Supreme Court justices that make unconstitutional rulings that result in the states losing their constitutional power of self-governance. Might I remind you that the Constitution is pretty clear. It gives limited power to the federal government. If it is a power that was not specifically given to the federal government and wasn't explicitly denied to the state government, then those powers go to the state, period. But you have, far too often, the federal government just don't care. They take the power. This one is kind of one that, goes into, again, with the deep state. Suspending our own legislatures and deciding them or declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. You see, again, The executive branch doesn't have the power to legislate. They don't have that authority. They do not have that power. And the legislative branch, who could easily do something about it by just writing a law. I mean, they write useless ones all the time. Why not write one that would actually mean something? These various regulations or these various, agencies writing regulations is unconstitutional, but yet they don't do anything about it. This one's great. Abdicated government by declaring us out of his protection and raging war. That one. You guys remember the 2020 Summer of Love? What did you have? Defund the police. You have these domestic terrorists that seized control of city blocks, destroying city buildings, destroying businesses, and it was allowed to happen. Those people that were in those areas did not benefit from the protection of law enforcement and government. It was a lawless zone. Whoever would have thought 10 years ago, whoever would have thought that that would ever happen in America? I mean, yeah, we had the Rodney King riots, but even still, there was a police presence. And I believe there was a military presence at some point in time. The Marine Corps was called into action. None of that happened during our summer of love. Moving on. 25. Illegal aliens being allowed to vote, being invaded by foreigners. Whenever they hold us accountable for the laws that we break, however, illegal aliens can break whatever law they want to. 25 talks about, transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries. Now, granted, I don't necessarily would call any of them, mercenaries or fighting bodies, but the bottom line is they're coming over here to affect change in how our federal government runs and operates. Moving on. Number 26. Unconstitutional rulings like these vaccine mandates, completely unconstitutional, and they are being enforced like they are laws again. The shutdown, the vaccine mandates. Number 27. Oh, yeah. Actually, 27 isn't illegal aliens. I think I skipped somewhere. Yeah, I did. I don't know what the heck I read, but I skipped something. But 26 is actually, vaccine mandates. I guess that was in there. Non-compliance that will result in further lockdown is one of the things they're threatening with. And they are also bringing about a, not necessarily a private police force, but what they are asking is Karen's help. We want you to be a tattletale on anybody that doesn't want to follow our unconstitutional rules, our mandates. Number 27, talks about domestic terrorism, and that's what we have in the form of Antifa and BLM. You have these people that, even if they do get arrested, they're let right back out on the street again because they won't hold them. You have people whom are very happy with what's going on that will post that bail if it is put on them. Domestic terrorists being allowed to operate, to function, to seize property and it be under their control, like in the Chaz zone. Number 28. With oppression. Democrats want what they want and they refuse to back down no matter what. And you have Republicans that refuse to stop them even when they do have a controlling majority. Doesn't matter. The Democrat agenda still seems to get pushed through. Moving on. This is where it gets interesting, because this one is a longer one. This is very much of a longer one. And this one basically amounts to this. I'm going to give you the paraphrasing. Get off my lawn. Be nice until it is time to not be nice. We fought the law and the law lost. You know, they were talking about, or at least I am referring to, you know, this is why we fought the Revolutionary War, was to get rid of this level of oppression. We fought it once. We're willing to do it again. The law lost last time we fought this. It will hurt you just as much as it hurts us, but if you still wish to go down the path you are currently going down, then bring it. If you want to fight, I am more than happy. I'm your Huckleberry. That's what I put in there. I'm your man. If you want some, come get some. That was eventually the attitude that our founding fathers had, that a lot of the colonists had. Enough of the colonists had it to fight and win the Revolutionary War. Moving on. What we need to do, though, you know, now here's the thing. Our Constitution is amazing in this aspect, and that is there is a method by which to break it down and start anew. But here's the thing. I don't think that necessary whatsoever. I really don't. Okay. I don't think it's necessary to start anew. There's a couple things that should be changed. One of which is give representation back to the states, because it's important to note that we are not a democracy. We are a republic. We are not a nation of people. The United States of America is not a nation of people. It is a nation of nations. Because in the same way that Canada is a country, so too is Illinois. Insert any of the other 50 states in there. We are a nation of nations. That's what we are. On the federal level, we are a nation of nations. Now, here's the thing when it comes to our representative and how the Congress was formed with the I said that wrong. With the legislative branch, you had one branch that was representative of the people. The number of representatives in each state was directly related to the percentage of population that resided in that state. That's why you have some states that have far more representatives than others. And then you have the other body of representation, the Senate, that represented not the people of the state, but represented the state of itself. And on that, every single state is equal. No matter the size, no matter the population, each state had equal representation in the federal government. It was like that for a reason. Nowadays, Illinois no longer has representation in the in the national government. California is no longer represented. They're trying to change it to fundamentally what our country was founded to be. We need to get rid of all these ridiculous and unconstitutional case laws. Kind of like Roe versus Wade. It's unconstitutional. It's not supposed to be there. It's a power that resides in the state. Get rid of all that crap, because there ain't nothing constitutional about case law. That precedence doesn't exist in the Constitution. It's something that is honored and respected amongst the federal government, but it's unconstitutional. Get rid of all that crap. Start from fresh. Get rid of these unconstitutional regulations. In fact, while you're at it, get rid of these laws, because here's the thing that's ridiculous, and this is why they tell you, any lawyer worth his salt is going to tell you that don't talk to cops no matter what. Why? Because everything you say can and will be used against you. Never for you. That's classified as hearsay, but against you all day long. These laws should have a sunset date on them. The fact is that there are still, let's just put it this way, laws that are 100 years old that ain't got jack diddly squat to do with how things are done today. But technically speaking, if you break that law, you can be in jail. You can go to jail for it. That's why you're not supposed to talk to cops at all, because they know way more law than what you do. If you give them 5 minutes, they can find something, some law, some obscure law that you've broken, and if they want to, they can detain you. They can consider that probable cause to search you, to violate your constitutional freedom. The fact that there is no sunset clause on laws is kind of ridiculous. Get rid of these unconstitutional departments in the executive branch, like the EPA, Department of Transportation, Department of Homeland Security. Now, I mean, granted, there are certain ones that, yes, they need to be there. You know, the FBI, the CIA, these are enforcement type of bureaucracies, enforcement parts, okay? But like the Department of Education, Department of Transportation, it shouldn't be there. Because neither one of those is a power of the federal government. They are the power of the state. They don't belong in the federal government. Get rid of them. It shouldn't be there in the first place. It's unconstitutional. And that pretty well concludes it right there. Another thing I would actually like to see is electoral college in individual states, which actually would be constitutional. That's one of the things that the Constitution says, that it ensures a republic form of government. We don't have a republic form of government in Illinois. We have a democracy. It's majority rule. Doesn't matter right, doesn't matter wrong, it's majority rule. Majority rule is democracy. You know, majority rule is mob rule. Mob rule is two sheep and a wolf voting for what's for dinner. Man, I screwed that up. Two wolves and a sheep voting over what's for dinner. I screwed that up. Y'all knew what I meant, though. You notice how the hesitation there? That was a fail. That's what you have, though. Two wolves and a sheep voting over what's for dinner. It ain't about right. It ain't about what's wrong. It's about what the majority wants. That's mob rule. We don't have mob rule in this country. We don't have a democracy. We were granted a republic. Representative republic, but a republic nonetheless. It's about right and wrong, not necessarily about what majority wants. So, guys, that pretty well sums it up. And that wasn't a whole heck of a lot shorter than what the last one was. I think the last one, the last time I tried was like an hour and 20 minutes. At least it wasn't that long. So, guys, I appreciate y'all tuning in and checking out the episode. There is, another one that is right around the corner where we are going to be talking about the powers of Congress, talking specifically about Article 1, Section 8. I believe it's Article 1, Section 8. It is in here somewhere where I was writing that down. Yeah, Article 1, Section 8. We will be talking about that on the next episode of Knowing the Constitution. So, guys, I got to take off. I got to go see a guy about a dog. So if you're in the area, feel free to stop on by, say hi. Bye. This has been The Ho-Ho Show. For more information, you can head to thehohoshow.com. And for the merchandise store, you can head on over to stinkpickle.com. That is stinkpikle.com. Until next time.